Hey, it's 11:40 The Bet Las Vegas, and our illustrious guest that we've had all week continues. This man will be on the call on ABC and ESPN, a 1:30 p.m. start time tomorrow. Not a Sunday start, but a Saturday start for the regular season finale for the Raiders. Louis Reddick joins us, obviously, with ESPN, covers college football and the NFL. And Louis, thank you so much. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us on the show. And I want to start here because I really appreciate your analysis on television and everything you do covering the league. For you, what's the biggest misconception that fans have, whether it's something regarding the league in the front office or the players on the field when it comes to fans in the NFL?
The biggest misconception?
Yeah.
Overall?
Yeah.
You know what? I don't know if it's a misconception, but I think it's one of the things that, in light of the Damar Hamlin situation, that I think people need to really keep in mind when they're watching NFL games and or they're watching a team build its team in the off season and, trying to put together the best roster to represent the fans the way they want. And that is that these people are real life, feelings having human beings that have real lives, and that they are in no way, shape, or form, whereas trying to disappoint fan bases, and therefore you need to kind of keep that in its proper context, that these guys are professionals by and large through and through, who really do put in so much time to try and really perform at a level that would make fan bases proud. And that, when they don't perform at the level that you come to expect from them, it's okay to express disappointment, but let's just kind of keep it all in context and not and kind of limit some of the rhetoric and the nastiness that sometimes fans direct towards players. And I'm not saying all fans. I'm not saying all fans at all. I'm just saying that I think there's a little bit of a reality check that's kind of sweeping over the nation right now when it comes to athletes and when it comes to football players overall, because football is so popular in our country. We know football's king. The NFL's king. College football's king. College football player. Everybody loves this game. Just keep that in perspective. Allow what happened to Damar Hamlin to kind of change and improve your perspective and continue to enjoy the game. Continue to boo if they don't get the job done. But just remember this. These guys are human beings just like us. And I think we'll just all be better for it.
No, 100%. And you bring up how popular the sport is. That's kind of the inspiration, because it's fascinating to me. We care so much about this sport, but when it really comes down to it, whether it's just the name of certain plays, we are so confused and we have no idea. It's foreign to us. And you bring up Damar Hamlin. Obviously, it's been a hellacious week in the NFL. We got a little bit of positivity. Breathing tube was removed. He's FaceTimed the team this afternoon. And then the NFL on the field came up with a decision that it is possible for the AFC Championship game to be a neutral site game. Obviously, no one could expect this and such a quick timetable to make this work without delaying anything. All things considered, was this the best case scenario for the NFL?
Yeah, I think, in many ways it is. I mean, it is a very, very tough situation, one where, teams have not played equal amounts of games in over, almost 70 years, 70, 80 years, I believe it is. And this is one of those situations where they're trying to, keep the competitive balance of the teams that eventually make the playoffs as much as possible on par with what they're used to. I think, obviously this game tomorrow is going to have a lot to do with whether or not we start getting into all those different scenarios or whether we don't. I think that makes our game in particular very, very interesting as far as the Chiefs being able to secure the number one seed. I do feel bad in many instances, in large, for Cincinnati, in the fact that if Kansas City does win this game, they don't have a vehicle to obtain an avenue to obtain the number one seed, which I think was very, very possible for them given how they've been playing. But I think if there's any team that can really withstand going on the road and beating anybody at any time, which they have shown that they can do, it is Cincinnati. You feel great for Buffalo. You feel great for their players. And that, right now, I think what they just care the most about is, one, their brother Damar Hamlin being healthy and being on the mend, and number two, that they can get back to playing football, knowing that some of the pressure has been released as far as understanding and knowing that he is on the road to recovery. So I think all in all, the league has handled this as best as they possibly can, and I think the teams will handle it as best as they possibly can and not use anything that doesn't break in the favor of individual teams as an excuse for, if they aren't able to obtain their goals, that they won't use it as an excuse and come back and rehash it later on.
And before we get into this Chiefs-Raiders game, you bring up Cincinnati, and one of the scenarios is that it's possible if Cincy plays Baltimore in the playoffs, that home field advantage in the wild card game is going to be decided by a coin flip. But when it comes to Baltimore, the most fascinating storyline to me heading into the playoffs is just whatever's going on in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, which obviously the contract situation has hung over that team since the offseason. Was this kind of just something that was inevitable? Or are you surprised that at this point, is he really hurt? Is he just sitting out? Like, what do you think's going to play out in this situation?
Well, I never thought it was inevitable because I always held out hope that it was something that wouldn't linger as the season went along. I hoped that it was something that the two sides could get together and come to a contract that, they both thought represented, fair value, for lack of a better word. I mean, players always feel as though they can get a better deal. Teams always feel as though maybe they pay too much. But usually when it gets to that point, you're usually at the point where you can strike a deal. I didn't think we would get to this point. I thought Baltimore would recognize and realize that they built their entire organization around this man's specific skill set. And to go ahead and, inject some level of, or rather not some level, a very significant level of uncertainty as to whether or not he would be a part of the organization, other than from a year-to-year basis, I didn't think that would be the route they would want. So, but here we are. Now he's injured. Now people are starting to question whether or not Lamar is trying to protect his health and kind of look at this season through the lens of his own best, what's best for him going forward. And I think that's unfair, considering that the guy has played with no regard to his own personal health throughout his entire career and laid it on the line for this organization throughout his entire career. I think there's no question that the Deshaun Watson contract lingers out there, and if you're Lamar Jackson, it's something that should linger. And it's something that should be used as a reasonable comparable when you're talking about contracts, and I'm sure it's something that he's presented to them, and that has been another roadblock to them getting a deal done. It's just, you hate to see this kind of thing happen. You hate to see it. And then now the conversation starts to shift towards, well, what is Lamar's motivation at this point? Because he's not someone I think any of us have ever questioned as far as whether or not he is totally and 100% committed to going out there and fighting for the cause, and that being to win games for his teammates. I think it's going to be one of those that'll be over later much rather than sooner. I just don't – the more this goes, the longer this goes, the more the ending I don't think is going to be something that we like.
Louis, I know you don't know this about me because we haven't even met in person, but I am starting the bandwagon to bring Lamar to Las Vegas. So what you're saying is kind of good for me. As we get into this Chiefs and Raiders game, obviously two teams opposite end of the spectrum. When it comes to the Chiefs, quiet is kept. They just keep winning. Tyreek Hill, it doesn't matter. Tua had his moment to be MVP. Jalen Hurts gets hurt, but he was primarily the MVP throughout the season. But now, is Patrick Mahomes going to walk away with the MVP?
Yeah, I think his consistency throughout this entire season, while integrating a lot of other new parts to this offense, both in terms of the stable of backs that he's working with are totally different. The tight ends have continued to improve behind Travis Kelce, and he's integrated them. Juju looks like a guy who's been playing in this system for 4 or 5 years. Marcus Valdez-Scaling has become a 3-position player. Kadarius Toney comes in here with people comes into Kansas City with people around the league having this idea that maybe he's this eccentric talent who can't stay healthy, who you can't depend on, and next thing you know, he's thriving in the system. Sky Moore's been picking it up all of a sudden, the rookie out of Western Michigan, who just looks spectacular. And the reason why all this stuff is coming together and why this train keeps on moving down the tracks at warp speed is, one, because of Patrick, two, obviously because the coaching staff has remained intact and they just have a winning culture and a winning philosophy that's been proven through time. But yeah, Patrick's become a victim of his own success. It's very similar to LeBron. It's very similar to Michael Jordan. It's just like when he does stuff now, people are like, yeah, we've seen that before. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. That's just what he does. Can you just show us someone else that can do it too? Because then people naturally look for other people to root for because they've seen it all before with him, and it's almost like they become bored with it. And I caution people against doing that because, although he's young in his career, these kind of guys, these kind of shooting stars, man, you better hop on and soak up every single thing that they do because they only come along once in a while. And yeah, I think in the end, this will wind up being maybe the season, if it ends the way many people expect it to, maybe the season that really this far, at this point in his career, is the best one he's ever had given the circumstances.
And the season the Raiders have is not what anyone here has expected. All hell's broken loose the past 2 weeks. Obviously, you're in town. You're calling the game tomorrow. You got to go to Henderson Raiders headquarters. What do you make of everything this season, spending time at the headquarters? Where do you see the team at and just the atmosphere and the mentality? What do you make of everything?
Yeah, well, one, the facility is freaking fantastic. Last time I was there, there was still a lot of boxes around and a lot of rooms that weren't being used. Well, it's up and running at full speed now, and the place is spectacular. It's freaking spectacular. And they have the infrastructure now to attract the kind of free agents, veteran free agents, and then once they get, when they bring draft picks in, for those guys to wind up wanting to spend all of their time over there because it's a one-stop shop from A to Z as far as everything that you would need to be a great professional football player. That's first and foremost. So that speaks to, what Mark Davis has done as far as investing into the infrastructure over there. I think, Josh knows, McDaniel knows how fortunate he is to be here at this place, given what it has to offer players around the league. And I think that's going to be important, especially given, the kind of work they're going to need to do this offseason to build out the rest of this roster so they can truly compete with Kansas City in the West and then with every other powerhouse in the AFC overall. This team has a lot of good pieces on it, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, this offensive line has really performed pretty damn well. Colton Miller has turned into one of the best offensive tackles in the league. Dylan Parham is going to be a superstar. He's a guy who's already shown veteran type of leadership. The running game overall, I mean, the season Josh Jacobs ran this year like a guy who really wanted to show some people that, hey, look,
felt disrespected, right?
4 or 5 back in this league. What's that?
I was going to say felt disrespected.
Sure he did. But the reason why I'm saying that, I don't want to just make it about this year is because I don't want to label Josh as the guy who now is going to have the moniker hanging over him, or rather maybe the characterization hanging over him that he may be just a one-hit wonder, that it was just a contract year, and you won't ever see that again. That's not really who this kid is. That's not who he was at Bama. That's not what his makeup is. But he's phenomenal at wide receiver. Look, Devontae Adams is like a senator, man. This guy is so damn polished as an individual and as a player. I don't think you can pay him enough money. I've always been a big fan. The wide receiver core overall, the tight end, I mean, they've got it. So, I mean, on the defense is really where they need to go to work, man. This team has been devoid of superstar power on that side of the ball for way, way, way too long. Right now, really, there's one guy. There's one guy you can count on every week that he's probably going to do something. And we all know it's Max. That's it. That's it. I mean, Chandler is one of the best pass rushers of all time. Okay, but he didn't have the impact on this team that people expected him to, along with Max. This team should be a better force as far as rushing the passer. Their defensive tackles are not good enough. The linebacker play is not good enough. They don't turn the ball over in the secondary enough. The corners aren't good enough. The safeties don't make enough impact plays. They have got to get that side of the ball going, and they got to get it going this offseason. So Dave Ziegler, along with Josh, has to they got to invest heavy in that side of the ball. They got to hit on some bargain-level free agents. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position as far as, where Derek ultimately ends up and what they wind up getting for him in the trade scenario. I'm sure they're going to want to maximize his value as far as recouping some draft assets for what they gave up to get Devontae. There's a lot of work to be done, but they've got some real good players. I expect this team to play well tomorrow, especially on the offensive side. I'm a Jarrett Stidham fan. I always have been since he came out of Auburn. And this being now his fourth season in this system, he shredded San Francisco last week. He shredded them. He's a guy who right now has a ton of confidence. And a guy like Devontae has a ton of confidence in him. I think you'll see a great performance on that side of the ball. I don't know what to expect from the defensive side other than from Max. And I hate saying that. So it could be a long day against a very motivated Kansas City team that's coming in here to say, hey, look, we're trying to lock up this number 1 seed. And we're pretty healthy. They may be missing a few guys here and there, but they're pretty healthy right now, and they're ready to roll. So, look, whereas this year we know that Vegas isn't going to be playing after tomorrow night, their season really, their off season really starts as soon as the final seconds tick off the clock because they got work to do, and they're not that far away.
So you bring that up, and obviously there's been Tom Brady rumors for this team for years on end. Do you, and obviously Mark Davis cares a lot, whether it's the Raiders, whether it's the Aces, because he's invested in both. You just got back from the headquarters, and you know that he's trying to win and he wants to win. And if you're saying that this team is close, do you go all in trying to get him to come to the Raiders? And honestly, on the flip end too, when you think of Tom Brady's perspective, if you want to leave Tampa, would you really come to Las Vegas instead of going to somewhere like San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, but it takes two to tango, right? I mean, Tom has, rumor has had it that he wanted to play for San Francisco before, but they were good with what they have. So it doesn't really matter what he wants. It really matters what both sides want. And I don't know, maybe I don't really know what his thinking is, and I think it's dangerous to ever try and think for a guy like Tom Brady because, he seems to like the fact that he likes to zig when people think he's going to zag. So I ain't going to say what he's going to do.
True that.
As far as the Raiders are concerned, would I look at him? Would I consider that option? Yeah, I would, because right now they are in the very definition of quarterback purgatory if they deem that Jarrett Stidham is nothing but a backup, which I don't think that they've come to that conclusion. And other people may have come to that conclusion, which I don't even know how you can because nobody's seen him play. Nobody really knows about him other than what he did against San Fran last week. You can throw out all the crap that happened in New England. That doesn't matter. Judge Jarrett Stidham based off of last week against the top defense in the NFL and then what he does tomorrow night. They have to make a decision about what the future looks like for him and whether or not they can ride with him in 2023 and beyond, build out around him, continue to build out around him on offense and just fortify this defense, which has nothing to do with Tom Brady. Or do they feel like we won't be able to really compete in the West with Jarrett? We need a guy like Tom, and we also need to build out the defense. And Tom, I mean, listen, Tom's not a 5-year solution, man. He's like year to year at this point. So if you go after him, you must be thinking that we're going to be able to get the pieces on defense to compete and slow down a guy like Patrick, because if you can't slow him down, I don't care what you do with the rest of your roster, offensively, it ain't going to matter because you're still going to lose games to him. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. If you're going to go after a veteran quarterback, you just better make sure you fix the defense, otherwise it's not going to matter. And see, this is why I say, and they don't have the draft assets to draft a young guy, to get into position to get one of the top flight quarterbacks coming out this year. That's why I say, until they know about Jarrett Stidham, they are in the very definition, they are the poster boys of quarterback purgatory. They don't really have a solution that would satisfy the masses and maybe even satisfy them. So we're going to find out a little bit more tomorrow.
And Louis Riddick joining us here on 1140 The Bet. We appreciate your time. Before we get you out of here, one last question, because you bring that up, and again, the investments of not only the facility, but getting Devontae Adams and making these trades to get these players here. Obviously, when things go bad with the team, then rumors start coming out at the end of the season. And, of course, the drama with Derek Carr. Do you believe there's any truth to the rumor that McDaniels and maybe Mark Davis, they kind of halfway through the season were like, you know what, after 9 years, we're kind of done with this situation with Derek Carr? Because now that you bring it up, they invested so much, it would kind of be foolish when there's no real backup plan because you don't have the financial space to get something different. So do you have any do you believe in any part of that rumor and kind of why all these offensive pieces that Derek Carr had, and it resulted in the worst season of his career?
Yeah, I think, look, Derek has, there's a time coming up here very soon, I believe it's February the 15th, where the Raiders have to make a decision about whether or not to guarantee his 2023 salary, which I believe the guarantee is upwards of, something like $40 million for 2023. That I think for them, given what happened this year, what transpired this year in this system, given all the weapons that they had, running game, wide receivers, improved offensive line, I think they at some point came to the conclusion that, you know what, this doesn't make good sense for us relative to everything else that we need on this roster to move forward with him by guaranteeing him that money. And that's me looking at it from the outside in, reading the tea leaves and saying, maybe for Josh, he's thinking, if this is the best he has to offer in this system relative to what maybe I think, a guy like Jarrett Stidham can give me, then it would just make perfect business sense to move on from this, not risk any more injury, for him in these last couple of games, and just kind of sit him down. We'll figure out what happens with him in the offseason, and we need to get a look at Jarrett Stidham and figure out what we have. I think all those, that kind of line of thinking definitely was in play here as the season panned out, and in particular over the past 5 weeks, where I believe he's thrown like 9 interceptions, not taking care of the football, not able to close out games, although, of course, you can blame a lot of that on the defense too, but it just wasn't up to par. It just wasn't up to par relative to what was coming down the road as far as financial investment in him. So, yeah, I think this has been a long time coming. They're trying to take a long-term approach to this too, while at the same time evaluating the present. And they said, you know what? That's it. We've had enough. We've had enough time. I think we've seen what we needed to see, and we need to be better than this. Of course, Devontae wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Derek Carr being here. So that's obviously a sensitive topic that I'm sure, that they seem to be ironing out with Devontae, and he seems to be, the ultimate pro who understands how this stuff works, and he's still going to be here. And for any quarterback whoever winds up being the quarterback here, damn, then they're stepping into a pretty sweet situation as far as the guys that they have to work with. So I think for the Raiders, for the organization, they're feeling as though, hey, look, I think we're going to be okay with maybe a guy who we have on the roster already, given how Stidham looked last week, and maybe we can be even better and have more financial flexibility relative to what kind of flexibility we would have had if Derek was here. So the emotional part of it, given that he's been here so long and given so much to this organization, is always a factor, and you hate that. You hate to see that kind of crap, but that's the business of the NFL. And I totally get it. I think the people in that locker room over there get it. And I think the fans, many of the Raiders fans have probably been, based on the kind of interaction I've had with them on social media, they're probably sitting there thinking, well, what the hell took so long, given how there's been so much, venom directed towards Derek over the years anyway.
Oh, Louis, it has been a messy divorce on these airwaves. I promise you that.
I know.
Louis, before we get you out of here, I say this is the highest compliment I can give. You made me feel like I was on the set of NFL Live. Thank you for joining us and all the information. Thank you, good sir, for joining us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. You have a good one.